Good morning and welcome to our webinar, the Paddock to Plate webinar. This morning we're going to focus on the food and beverage industry. By way of introduction, my name is Brett Mundell and I represent Leverage Technologies. Quick introduction to Leverage Technologies. We've been around for 14 years. We have 250 plus clients, offices in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. And as I said, we specialise in solutions for food and beverage and putting together software solutions to assist across your organization. So finance, distribution, logistics, manufacturing, food processing, and all of those requirements that you would expect around areas like traceability, HACCP requirements, weighing scale integration. The agenda today will kick off with Gary, who will go through with us food safety, what Australian food producers need to have in place. I'll then take over from Gary and I'll talk a little bit about ERP systems, business management solutions and software, and how we can take, the advice we're getting from Gary and his team, and we can put that into software solutions and processes and structures. And then Philip will show us some of the actual solutions in question and a few touch points associated with an actual ERP or business management solution and how we might use that in the food and beverage industry. So I'm going to hand over to Gary, who's going to talk us through food systems.
Morning, everyone. My name's Gary Kennedy. I'm the MD of Correct Food Systems. We're a food safety consultancy, and we say we're the food techs for companies who are too small to have a food tech. We're going to talk today about safety and what's required these days, primarily from your customers, but to some extent also from a regulatory viewpoint as well. And in terms of what we're talking about, here we go. The Food Standards Code, which is, if you bothered to print it out, is about 1,800 pages. There's recall, that's another 100 pages. There's the State Food Act, it's another 50 pages. If you printed them out, you'd have about 2,000 pages. But even with that, it doesn't cover everything that's often commonly required. So, for example, food quality, the Food Standards Code's only food safety. So if things like colour, flavour, aroma, texture are not covered. Nutrition, if you're selling particularly into markets like aged care and hospitals, there are nutrition standards and the food standards and measures and weights. If your product's underweight, it's illegal, but the Food Standards Code doesn't mention that. So just saying we meet the laws in Australia is probably not enough for your product to be even legal in Australia. Certainly, there's nothing in the Food Standards Code that requires that your product is edible. So if we're talking about supply, there are over 100 organisations who have introduced standards well in excess of the Food Standards Code, and some of the more common organisations of standards that are known, Coles and Woolworths figure loudly in that, but so do people like McDonald's and Qantas and Aldi, Caltex. A number of major customers require organisations to have food safety and quality management systems well in excess of the 2,000 pages that are required by law. So major supermarkets, major caterers, people like Spotless and Compass, food manufacturers, so the big guys, Nestle, Kraft, Kellogg's, only buy from these sort of people with bigger systems. All the big restaurant chains, McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, all the airlines, and even major government food tenders. Their requirements well in excess of the law, for example, for the armed forces tenders and some of the state hospital and food contracts. We should also mention in terms of exporting, the old AQUIS, the Australian Quarantine and Inspection Service, is now the Department of Agriculture and Water Resources, and they have much higher standards in what they call their approved arrangements if you're exporting perishable foods. And in addition to that, countries overseas, the importing countries, often put a lot of their own rules in place that have to be met. A lot of those are non-tariff trade barriers to stop our product getting into their country, but all of that has to be built into the system in Australia. While we're at this slide, there's a fourth one we should potentially mention, is most insurance companies these days go well beyond the Food Standards Code. Most people want business continuity or recall insurance. I work for one of the major insurance companies, and they won't issue insurance policies unless you can show your systems. So what's required in food safety, or well beyond food safety, for major retail chains such as Woolworths and Caltex and McDonald's? They require far more business management and quality assurance systems than just food safety systems in production. Long gone are the days where just because you could show your product was made to specification in the factory, you'll pass one of these organizations' audits and be accepted as a supplier to them. It's also a requirement there must be independent certification. So you'll have to have your organization employing someone at great expense to you to come in and certify you're meeting these longer, more advanced systems. A lot of these systems have elements in them that we would recognize from ISO 9000 or the HACCP-based ISO 22000. So things like business continuity, management review, management commitment, internal audit, that are straight out of the ISO standards, are elements of these food standards for the major retailers. And it's expected that this is a whole of business activity. Food production can't be seen as a standalone activity, and food safety as a standalone activity. It's integrated within the whole business management. It's expected that everyone from senior management down to the most junior casual worker is inherently involved in this system. HACCP systems need to be in place. I'm hoping people speaking here know HACCP now. It's been in for a few years in Australia. It needs to go from every step right through from initial procurement through to delivery. It needs to cover night shift and day shift, casuals and permanents, as well as what you normally do. It needs to cover food quality issues and regulatory issues. For example, things that are not food safety, like making sure it's the correct species in the box, having the correct number in the carton. Underweights are now required to be part of a food safety quality management program, not just standalone things like cooking and cooling. And it must meet international HACCP design rules. In terms of Codex HACCP, it must be laid out a certain way. In addition to just making sure product is produced safely so that not receiving and cooking and cooling and packing is safe, they require stock control and product identification and traceability. Some of these standards require full traceability through the entire process. So things like work in progress, batch control of ingredients during processing, tracing of rework and downgraded stock are all part of this. Cleaning procedures, personal hygiene, pest control, maintenance, and preventative maintenance, full document control, whether electronic or manual, including cloud-based and web-based systems, and full process corrective action, complaints and recall procedures. On top of that, approved supplier program, which doesn't just cover goods and raw materials, it covers services. So people that even odd things like security, garbage services, calibration, training, pest control, and so on. Some of the other elements that are things that we see typically in the larger things, product design and development requirements, right back from when it's an initial brainwave from someone right up to shelf life trials, full product validation, proving that your product will last to the end of its shelf life and it will be safe, plus testing standards for things like microbiological, chemicals, foreign objects, product labeling and claim validation. And claim validation is a big growth curve. If you say your product is free range or organic or gluten-free, what does that mean? Product release, which is where somebody finally puts their hand on their heart and say, that's okay to send out. Who is that? It might be the person on the packing line who's the last to see it. Retention sampling. Many of these standards require to keep a sample of every product every single day and then eat it after the end of its shelf life. Additional requirements if you're high care and high risk. A lot of these perishable, ready-to-eat foods, things like small goods, salads, sandwiches, sushi, much, much harder rules than that. Coles, for example, has an additional 100 pages. if you fall into that sort of category, and supply them. Food fraud, big growth area at the moment. We're talking things like biosecurity, terrorism, sabotage, all of those sort of elements. Workplace health and safety is appearing in many of these. So occupational health and safety is not a standalone department. Many of these standards now require this to be brought into effectively what was originally the food safety system. We're starting to see the first standards put environmental. No one as yet is prescribing the ISO 45000 standard, but people want environmental controls, waste, sustainability. And then we have the whole element of social welfare being brought into these standards as well. So things like fair pay, slavery and indenture, child labour, legality to work in Australia, fair pay, a right to join a union, right to associate. All of those social welfare elements are now being brought into these standards. So we see even some people like Woolworths, IKEA, Compass have gone way, way beyond making sure the food was safe. And this is now a far more business practice where all sorts of elements within the business that used to be standalone now have to be integrated into the one quality management system. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Really insightful. Appreciate your wealth of knowledge in with regards to food safety. This leads on to the next segment today, which is with regards to choosing an ERP solution. With regards to ERP, we really want to make sure that any system that we choose leads us through the compliance that Gary was just discussing. But compliance, HACCP, traceability is only one of the reasons we might choose a new enterprise resource planning or business management solution for ERP. We're also looking for business benefits. So as we're going through this process, we always need to bear in mind that what we're also looking for is business outcomes associated with improved cash flow, better customer service, on time in full delivery. And we're also looking to take advantage of new technological advancements in cloud and mobility, artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things to bring that into our business to show real advantage. By way of background, just a quick definition in terms of ERP. ERP or Enterprise Resource Planning really indicates that it's software which runs across your business. So it's taking care of the financial side of your business, all of your invoicing, your accounts payable, accounts receivable, logistics, inventory control, right through the manufacturing, processing side and reporting. So across the entire enterprise. And in food, obviously, then what we're talking about is very specific and around specifics to do with traceability and to help you with HACCP. So when it comes to ERP solutions for food and beverage, not all systems are created equal. Your choice of ERP solution will depend on multiple factors: your budget, functional requirements, company size, geographical footprints, etc. The key when selecting a new solution is to run a comprehensive and structured approach to the selection and implementation process. Run correctly, your business will reap the rewards associated with this, both in terms of traceability and in terms of structure, but also those business benefits we discussed earlier. But we've all heard the horror stories about ERP implementations that have run way over budget and have taken years to implement. So how do we avoid this? We avoid this by applying a more structured approach to our selection process and our implementation process. And part of what I want to go through today for 5 or so minutes is that selection process. We should start our process by drafting a short list of potential suppliers for our food and beverage industry. We need to start by mapping out what are we actually looking to achieve through a new system. Yes, we want better compliance. Perhaps we want improved cash flow, better customer service. Let's draft up the how and why we're planning to do this. Let's then go online and research systems. The internet is full of great information these days, online videos, demonstrations, reviews associated with systems specific to food and bev across ERP. So let's get online, let's do that research. From that online research, you should be able to draft a list of 5 or 6 potential providers for your solution. What we then need to do is we need to get a scope and a structure together. So what we're now doing is we're documenting our requirements. Some of these requirements might be quite generic. So it might be, for example, I want to be in the cloud. I want business intelligence type reporting. And other of the requirements might be very specific, associated with your business and or with the food and bev industry. I think the good idea here is to document the scope and structure and send it to a list of 4 or 5 shortlisted suppliers and ask them to respond in writing to the actual questions that you've asked. And a number of your questions would be associated with the actual project itself. So what budget would be required? How long will it take to implement? And other of your questions will be quite specific about functional requirements. Defining of your budget is critically important. There is no point in running a lengthy process of evaluation of ERP providers to find that the budget in no way, shape or form matches what you're willing to spend on a new system. So one does have to be realistic in that regard. This structured selection process that we're talking about here will take you through the scope, the budget, the short list. Obviously, at that point in time, then what you're going to do is you're going to get demonstrations from potential providers. And these demonstrations should include some generic aspects like finance and logistics, and then specific requirements, again, that your business has. The demonstration should include your data and your information. We don't want generic demonstrations. You should be able to then look at an experienced partner for your industry. So what you're looking for is someone who has specific experience with HACCP, with food technology. In listening to Gary talk about food standards, we can see and we all understand the complexities associated with the food industry. So as you look for a software provider, make sure that you're choosing someone who has previous experience in the industry. There's absolutely no point reinventing the wheel. There are some technology choices to be made. For example, do you want cloud or on-premise? But again, these choices are simple technology choices. Bring everything back to the business advantages that you want to put in place. Understand the implementation methodology. It's critical to make sure that the partner that you choose is going to run a implementing ERP through this selected provider and have a discussion with those customers. How long did it take to implement the ERP solution? What benefits did they get? Were budget expectations met? What would they do differently if they ran the process again? So running this process of choosing an ERP system through budget, scope and structure, demonstrations, also requires you to meet the team as well that will implement the system for you, because that team will be embedded with your team for anywhere between 4 months and 9 months or so to actually implement the ERP solution. Make sure you look at their CVs. What previous experience have they got in food and beverage? Do they understand traceability requirements and HACCP? Work with that team prior to choosing them to be inside your business, helping you through your ERP implementation. When we look at food itself, I've talked about HACCP and traceability. I've talked about business benefits. We really need to balance these two aspects when looking at an ERP solution. So what we have typically is we want to take advantage of new technology. We want to take advantage of cloud, of mobility, so that our sales teams can have information at their fingertips as and when they want it. But we can't ignore that in the food industry, we've got HACCP requirements, traceability requirements, and some specific elements around food weight, for example. So we need to make sure that whatever product we select, we have this functionality natively covered off in the product, or the ability to include each of those elements, like batch control, for example. That leads me to the future of the food industry and where we're going in terms of software and technology. And what we're seeing at the moment is that we are in a much more connected world. So there is much more data being made available to us. That data comes to us through mobility devices and sales teams on the road, EDI from the major retailers, information back from the retailers in terms of pad data of what's been sold and when. So there's social media, marketing. So there's a lot more data available to us in this internet of things, connected devices type world. And now it's a question of what we do with that data. So all this data received from multiple different sources, we need to have intelligent business information systems to be able to sort and analyze that data so that we can make better decisions with it. This will lead into areas like artificial intelligence. And again, I think we have to be practical about areas like artificial intelligence and say that what it will probably give us in the food and beverage industry is more information about real-time delivery. So the truck is on its way from a supplier to our warehouse. Artificial intelligence will look at the route that the truck is taking, the stops it needs to make, the current traffic, the fact that there's an accident on the road, and will then notify the warehouse that the truck will arrive at 5 minutes past 8. About 4 or 5 minutes out, artificial intelligence will then send a reminder to the warehouse staff to get ready to unpack because the truck's about to arrive at the front door. Again, practical examples of the way information and technology will assist us in the future. There's no doubt that we're undergoing a digital transformation, and we hear people talk about this constantly. The digital transformation comes all the way through from marketing and the way we sell to our various suppliers, the demands that the suppliers and customers are making on us as a food and beverage business, our customer interactions. And we really need to embrace technology to make sure that we're ahead of the curve in this regard. Some of those technology moves are very simple. EDI, for simple and powerful order information. AP automation, so we can automate purchase planning, purchase order generation, workflow, expense management automation. Others are somewhat more broad and open, like artificial intelligence and the connected world and large volumes of data. But either way, what we really need to do is lay a platform, a foundation of software that can help us streamline those processes and stay ahead of the competition. I'm hoping that what we've shown there is a little bit of a discussion around the importance of technology in your industry, and also the fact that we need a structured approach to the implementation process of ERP and the selection process as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Philip, who's going to go through some actual software. He's going to show you Sage, Enterprise Management, just to give you a look and feel of what's possible inside an ERP solution. Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Brent. Also, I'm going to sign on. As you can see, I'm accessing that from a web browser, which means that I could be on the road, with a tablet and still have access to my data. Going to be greeted first by something that is of things that I have to keep an eye on, and they'll be presented, to me on a screen similar to the one that you see now. So on here is a collection of a number of indicators, reports, etc. You can see here, for instance, I keep an eye if I'm in manufacturing. I want to keep an eye on my production in progress at the moment. Maybe some, with stock shortages. Everything seems to be fine. I don't have any shortages, at this stage. There's also something coming from, outside Sage here, which is an exchange rate. If I'm, importing, exporting, and I want to keep, an eye on exchange rate, from, my various suppliers, for instance. And there could be, different types of presentations. Here is a graph looking at, progress against budget. And there's also here a calendar of the orders that I'm expected, to receive. So just a different, style of things that can be presented to me on a daily basis. The other type of screen that I'm going to be given is process flows. So a graphical representation of the things that I have to do in my position, rather than going through, complex menu, options, and remember where, that option that I need is, I can have, something represented in a graphical form, as you can see, here. So it's very simple, particularly for people that are new to, the ERP environment, to find, what, the function that they're meant to execute. So for instance, here, if I decide to go into, purchase orders, I just have to click on the button here that says purchase orders, and you can see in a logical fashion. There's, receiving, etc. I'm now inside, the purchase order screen coming from that graphical process that I just activated. Just again, in terms of navigation, all the screens in Sage are represented in that fashion. Left-hand side is what I've done in the past. So all these are my purchase orders, and I have ways to retrieve them and make sure that I'm not going to lose power. The middle section is where my current purchase order or the work that I'm doing, at present, and right-hand side is the actions that I'm going to take in the future. Okay, I've also created another item here. You can see this interface, is very flexible. So I have here a way, for me to drive, the rest of the presentation. We want to talk about, 3 different topics, compliance, planning, and traceability. So let's go into compliance, first, and see the elements that you'll find in Sage to support, compliance. So here I'm into my product master. So this is where I'll define, all my products, ingredients, finished goods, semi-finished, etc. And the same presentation again. So all the products that I have in the system, the last one that I worked on. So I'll search for a particular product that is a raisin bread through the description. Bread, and this is the one that I was after, that's cinnamon raisin bread. So my record has changed, and we'll just explore a number of the fields that are available, so that you can see the readiness of Sage for the environment that we're discussing this morning. Okay, so first of all, there's the ability to attach, a number of notes, and not just free form, but, things that can be helping me to prepare a product information form, or PIF. So here I've got a description of, I've kept a record of the allergens, and I can also keep a record of the nutritional, information for that product. In addition to that, as you can see here, I can attach, various documents. If I click on this little paperclip, I've also kept a record of the front label, which is also, sometimes part of the requirements that you have to, comply with. So with Sage, you keep everything in the same spot. So they're all, linked and, connected together. Let's explore, a couple more things. So if I go into this tab here, obviously, the bare minimum is lot, or batch control, management. And this is all supported here. It even goes to, lot and sublot, level. Moving further down, I can see here that it's going to keep a record of the allergen, content of my product. And what it does, it has a look at all the ingredients and rolls that up. So here we're talking about a finished product, my cinnamon raisin bread, and the various ingredients, that I've put in there. I've given me a qualification saying that I'm using E for egg, and W for wheat, for instance, and M, for milk. So I'll know exactly, how to classify, this particular product just by, rolling up the ingredients. A whole section here on control, recontrol and exploration. So I want to be able to figure out, what use by date I can have on my finished product. I can also put information in there to make sure that I control my ingredients on a regular basis. Maybe they need to be, the quality controlled every 2 months. Maybe they lose their potency, or maybe they're no longer suitable. So all that is going to be driven, by this section found here. Talking about, exploration. So here here I've got a use by date, of within 30 days. Maybe not all my customers, are happy, with that. Maybe they'll impose on me a minimum shelf life. So here I've got, 2 different customers, and the first customer wants to have, 24 days of, shelf life, and the second one here wants 18 days. So you can see that you can modulate this expiry, and obviously as you process orders, the system will direct the picking as you're preparing the order for dispatch to the one with the appropriate shelf life. Going a little bit further and exploring, quality control. So here and you can vary that, site, by site, or production site by production site. So here I've got a flag that will allow me to say, for this particular product, I would like to do, to run quality control. And if I'm running quality control, what technical sheets or critical control points am I going to put against, this particular product? So here, with, Sage, it's always possible to delve into more details and, and drill down. So if I open this little door here, it will tell me that this critical control point is actually made of 2 questions. One is the moisture content, and the other one is a temperature. And I can insert, these critical control points at various stages in my production process. Okay, so that's, to give you an idea of, the background information to support, some of the constraints that I put, on you in terms of, quality control and handling of products. Let's go now into planning. So there's 2 aspects of, in planning. One is material, ingredient planning, and there's also capacity planning in terms of your production. So the screen that I'm showing now will help me determine what I need to order and when. So we're really talking here about, a time phase reordering, so that, there's things that you need to act upon, now it will tell you and will take into consideration your supplier's lead times. But there might be things that you'll be informed of, and you still have time, so you don't, no need to, raise purchase orders right now. So I'll just go into criteria to narrow down my search to, food products, and the screen that we'll see is going to give me a list of everything that the system, knows. So in order to determine what needs to be reordered, you have to take into consideration a number of things. You have to take into consideration what you have on stock today, on hand today, what you have already on purchase orders that are likely to, arrive within the next few weeks. You also have to look at the production that you have currently in progress, and forecasts as well. So you can use the system to model what the demand is going to be in weeks and months to come, and the system will come up with recommendations. So that's what you see here. You can see there's a number of supply orders. Maybe I've got a multi warehouse environment, and my satellite warehouses are putting demand on me. So there's a transfer request, here, and then the system is, and there's also, firm work orders. And then there's a number of things that will have the mark, here as suggested. I go to the second page. So there's a number of things here. We suggest that you make, this particular product or semi-finished product. The system is suggesting you should be ordering, some labels, for instance. You should be ordering some boxes. And, every time it will take into consideration the lead time. You can see that here in that canola oil, where we need it on the 18th, and the system will compute, the date backwards to say, well, you need to place, the order on the 3rd if you want to have that on the 18th. So this is basically, to help you determine what needs to happen. And let's have a look at this oil, for instance. And what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to execute the plan. So I could say I'd like to raise that order for that oil, and it's suggesting the quantity, and I can change that quantity obviously. Or if I happen to be ordering several things from the same supplier, it will allow me to group. So I can say I want all the products, from this supplier. So I'm going to eliminate, the preload, the table, and it will, show me all the products that I need. I happen to be buying, other things, from that particular supplier. So whilst I'm at it, it will suggest. So I can select or remove, depending on the dates that this is needed by. I can also have a look if it's something that is bulky. I can determine or ask the system to help me with container loading and see how many containers I would need. So it looks like in a 20-foot container, I'd be able to put all that. I've got a little bit of space here left, so that means that I'd be able maybe to order a few more things if I wanted to make use of of the space. So I just wanted to show a quicker view as well. So obviously the first screen that I was showing, if I'm the purchasing manager, I probably only want to see the purchase order suggestions, and that's what I would see here. So it's no longer mixed with customer orders, etc. It only says this is what you need to purchase. If on the other hand, I'm the production manager, I'm interested in work order suggestions, and again, I'll have only that on the screen, and I can make decisions as to when I'm going to execute that and put that into production. The other aspect of planning, so it looks like I've got a handle on my ingredients here, is the actual production lines and the scheduling that happens there. So if I just ask for the plan here. So what it's doing, it's going back into all my work orders that I might have placed, and it will come up with a best suggestion depending on the resources that I can place. And this is an example. Here, for instance, I've got all my resources here. So I've got an oven, I've got food preparation operators, and it will put the various steps to get to the finished product. Just a connection to what we just discussed in terms of product availability. This little diamond here means that the the products, the ingredients, will be available at that particular time. Okay, so I can use this. There's a number of ways that we can use this production scheduler. So there's an order for Coles, an order for JB Lee Gourmet Foods. And I can see what's happening here. There's also some indicators here. So this little thing, tells me that this was the anticipated finish time. So it looks like I'm a little bit ahead of time. And just to make my life easier, the tool can also tell me which orders are late and which orders are likely, to be on time or ahead of time. So I can see I've got a green light here, so everything is fine. This one, was meant to be here, and it's going to be delayed, a little bit. So I can take corrective action, if I need to. This tool is not only for, production people. So production people can have a look, on a tablet on the floor. They can, very well, if I'm working at the, in the oven section, I can see that these are the two next orders that I'm, meant to be working on. So I can eliminate, a bit of paper here. I can also have my customer service people looking at it, from a customer point of view. Where is the Coles order at? Or it looks like it's going to be a little bit late, but not, not too much. what about the next one, etc. So again, this tool is can be utilized in different departments in your organization. Okay. The last aspect was, traceability. So let's have a look at that. So we are using a number of ingredients. We, put together finished goods, and all that is meant, to have, batch or lots, lot numbers, expiry dates, etc. And I want, in the next couple of seconds, I want to demonstrate what's going to happen in terms of, traceability. What if I want to look at some information in terms of a finished product and see where it's been sold, if I need to take, corrective action, or what if I want to investigate, a particular ingredient, starting, from a finished product, going back and see where that ingredient has been used in, other productions. So I'm going to have a look at a particular lot here. And I'm going to ask the system to tell me everything about that cinnamon raisin bread, and this particular lot. So it's retrieving everything that has happened to it. I'll enlarge that so we can see a little bit more. And there's a lot of information on this screen, as you can notice. The first thing is that, well, it's been sold, and these are the quantities: 5,920. 1,910 to these two customers. So this is where the finished product ended. And below that, you can see an explosion, or you can, collapse or expand, and you can see ingredient by ingredient what has happened, to that led to that particular raisin bread to be produced, that day. So I can have, look at everything. I can see that, the ingredients have been issued to work orders, etc. I'll just have a look at, something in particular I'd like to see. So you can see here, in addition to, products having been issued to work orders, I can also see my quality control records as well. So that particular flour was subjected to a quality control. I'll pick this one here, and I want to see what has happened. So I can again, drill down into more details, have a look at what happened. What were the results? I'm having a doubt about that particular flour. When we put it through quality control, what happened? And I can see when it was done, and what was the expiration. Expiry date. I can have a look at the history. So there were two, questions. The first one was answered by yes. The second one was answered by 415. I can have a look at what it was. So the first one was, did we have raw material certification? Yes, no. And what was the moisture content, at the time? So satisfied that, I had done the proper quality control, I still wanted to have a look at where else this particular flour had been used. So I know that's been used in this particular lot, but where else, did it get used? So I can open that little window here and say downstream, traceability, and suddenly I have everything that happened to that particular flour. So I can see that it's been used on this particular work order. There was some quality control, issues. I can see where I got it from, because originally I received it from, one or several suppliers. And I can see that this particular lot, comes from, these people. So once again, we've been able to navigate through, the various steps that led me to my finished product, and investigate, very easily all the ingredients back and forth. So what we've been able to do in a few minutes is, just to demonstrate the abilities of, Sage in the food and beverage environment. So you can see that there's it's been designed, for that environment from a so from compliance point of view, then from a planning point of view, looking at having the right ingredients on time, and also having the capacity to produce in order to guarantee, a level of customer satisfaction with your customers. And finally, with traceability. One last thing that I wanted to show is, and something that Brett was mentioning, before. So what we just saw is the day-to-day operation, the must-have, for a food and beverage, operation. All that needs to be in place. If we take, a step up a little bit, is an ERP system is also there to help you manage the business. So what we're showing here is a level of, business intelligence, looking at a number of things in your business and helping you, make decisions. So it's looking at, performance indicators such as, order fulfillment. Was I on time? What was the quality like? So what were, the impact on lead times? What we're, keeping an eye on production cost as well. What is late? What is, ahead of time? So Sage is also capable of, providing you with that layer of decision making. With that, I'll give that back to Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. A great demonstration showing us what's possible with Sage Enterprise Management, and specific reference to ERP for the food and beverage industry. In conclusion, we need to embrace technology to get ahead, stay ahead, and to run a better business. And I hope that what we've shown today through the discussions with Gary associated with food requirements and standards, and then myself, the discussion associated with ERP software selection and technology and where technology is going, and then on to Philippe showing us some of what's possible inside an ERP solution from a food and beverage point of view, and then also associated with business intelligence, that you've got a feel for what's possible and what we need to do to stay ahead in terms of technology. One of the elements is a transformation workshop that we will be drafting up for a particular winner associated with today's webinar. So Vittorio and the marketing team at Leverage will work through that over the next few days. And they'll also work through recordings of today's webinar and scripting, so that we can send to you information associated with today, and then you can share it with various team members and review the video at your leisure. We'll also send out contact details, so that if you have any specific questions for the team, that you can post those, and then we can get back to you on anything that you might want to ask associated with food standards or technology in the food industry, Sage or ERP. So thanks for your time today. I trust that you got value from the webinar, and you will be hearing from Vittorio and the Leverage team shortly to follow up and make sure that you've got all the information that you might require. Thank you for your time.